So, so this morning we woke up to the fact, Cern basher, that the economy is growing even faster than we thought it was. The second quarter grew at 3.3% when the first estimate was 3.0. Now the pundits that were the PhDs and all those people who think that they know thought it was going to be up to 3.1, but in fact it was 3.3. And of course, everybody in the administration is taking a bow, what do you call it? Yeah. Anyway, they're saying, see, it's doing great. What do you so I don't want to talk about the economy. I just wanted to say that.
Great intro.
Great intro. Yeah. Listen, I planned this out as always. It's all planned. It's all 100% scripted. CERN, what I really want to talk about is this economy is going to go crazy. The evidence is all in. I mean, yeah, sure, things can happen. You can always have, some new war or some crazy, situation with some weather event or volcano or something that would change everything. But barring nutty black swan situations, the economy looks like it's set to really, really go. The Times, Time Magazine came out this morning with their list of the top 100 AI influencers, the people that are most important in AI, the thinkers, they said, which they do every year. And Elon Musk was number two
Hmm.
in the list. Now, I don't know if this was a list in order of importance or not, because I can't find it now, but the person who was number one I'd never heard of. So, and I didn't look him up yet. So, and of course, it's Time Magazine. So, what do they know? But David Sachs was listed.
Hmm.
Who wasn't listed was the President of the United States. And that's weird, except it's Time Magazine. Time Magazine doesn't apparently take into consideration that David Sachs would not be on that list if the president hadn't created an entirely new Department of Governance and then put David Sachs in that position for the very first time to run it. And that would be the whole area of cryptocurrency and everything related to crypto and to blockchain.
Right.
And David Sachs is getting huge high marks for what he's already accomplished in his first few months. I'm going to forget the Genius Bill and what was the other one?
The Stable Act, I think, was it?
Stable, well, it was stable coin, but it wasn't called the stable. It was had another name. I forget, but there's been two acts, one of which is passed, the other one which is expected to pass. And both of those would set some of the guide rails, some of the rules. Um, some of the things that people were confused about in terms of whether these coins are assets or whether they are storehouses of value or whether they're currencies, et cetera. Those kinds of issues are being addressed. And so I think the president of the United States should have been on the list and maybe really, really high on the list, just given the fact that he has done that piece of it and has also said that we'll have coins as part of our national endowment as our something in that's been being held as a in addition to gold as a storehouse of value and as eventually part of a sovereign wealth fund. I guess now already, right? Because if they, I'm sorry, I'm talking so much, I got to let you in. But I think right now, if they seize coins,
Right.
bitcoins,
Yeah.
in a raid of some kind or whatever, if they seize them in a criminal investigation, those go into the sovereign wealth fund. Anyway, I'll shut up for a minute. What do you think about everything I just said?
Well, there's a lot there. Just on the point about the sovereign wealth fund, I think that a lot of people in the Bitcoin crypto community were hoping that the government would start to buy more Bitcoin.
Mhm.
But Scott Bessent sort of put cold water on that idea, I think, in an interview a week or so ago, that they would just continue to take the coins that they seized and retain those.
Mhm. Mhm.
It wasn't an active buying program. Now, what is interesting, though, is there are more and more countries that have introduced legislation to build their own strategic reserve of Bitcoin. And if that is a trend that takes off, then we better follow because you don't want to be the last one in the door. right? This is the whole game theory concept with Bitcoin. If there's only 21 million Bitcoin to be had, you want to buy it early, not late,
Mhm.
right? And if nation states are getting involved, probably best you're in the front of that curve rather than the latter part of it. So I'm hopeful there that smart decisions will be made. I'm also hopeful that as people think through the disruption to the economy that AI and humanoid robots and everything we've talked about bring on the economy, which is massive deflation.
Mhm.
If left to its own devices, everything's going to become cheaper in a material way.
Not everything, by the way. This is a very important part of my
Well,
chapter in the book, is
yeah,
that there will still be things that will be in limited supply, like tickets to a concert, tickets to a game, well-located properties, vacation spots, etc. There are many things
sure.
like that that
Yeah,
will still have limited supply, and so those things may rocket in cost because we'll be spending so much less on staples, on day-to-day things.
that's right. Yeah, no, a very good point. Thank you. What it will mean is that it's going to force people to put their money that they've earned,
Mhm.
their store value, they're going to have to be very intentional about where they place that.
Right,
You don't want to be placing that in something that's going to be deflationary,
right,
right? Now, the other thing too, from a government perspective, the governments have a lot of debt. When you pay off the debt, you want to pay it with money that's been inflated because
right,
then you don't have to pay as much of the debt. If you have deflation, it becomes more costly to pay off the debt, right? So governments are heavily incentivized to have at least a little bit of inflation.
right,
So we're going to have this interesting dichotomy between a heavily deflationary economy from all this new tech that's coming to the fore, with a desire from a government standpoint to not have too much deflation.
right.
How do governments not have too much deflation? Well, they have to just print more money.
So don't you solve both of those if you have a sovereign wealth fund to begin with? So to the extent that you take the money that you're, to the extent that you invest money into the S&P or
Yeah.
into any other asset that might be appreciating,
And Intel?
into Intel, exactly. To the extent that you do that, and that inflates, or that goes up in value, it doesn't inflate, goes up in value faster than inflation. Or if there's deflation and that is actually going up in value during deflation, then you have the exact result that you want, as opposed to having the economy inflate, and which is a tax on the people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, isn't it? And also, I think it's important to draw a distinction between inflation, as measured by CPI,
Right,
which is a basket of goods that's determined by the government that they track.
right.
Your inflation and my inflation rate is different than that.
Yes,
That for the country at whole, for what people consume, maybe it's a reasonable estimate. CPI does have its flaws that are
right,
heavily talked about. We don't need to get into that here. But that's only the first hurdle. A bigger issue is debasement, right? The government always talks about CPI because that's the lower number.
right,
And that's what they peg increases of Social Security to and so on,
right.
CPI.
Mhm,
And the government is incentivized to have some inflation, but not too much,
mhm, mhm.
right? So it's kind of managed in that sense. But currency debasement is kind of the rate at which you're being diluted, right? If you think about it in terms of that, as a stockholder in USA Inc.,
Mhm.
you own a US dollar. If more dollars are printed, then that dollar has less of a claim on US GDP than it used to before.
Right,
So debasement has been running at a higher rate than inflation. I think from 2011, I think it was, to 2025, inflation might have been 3% and debasement was 13%.
wow.
Like a big difference.
Mhm.
Historically, maybe it's not quite that much of a difference, but it's
Right,
still higher. Monetary debasement's been higher than consumer inflation. And ultimately, the debasement is the true hurdle, right? Because if you're just being diluted out of your basically your ownership of USA Inc., if you're not keeping up with monetary debasement. So back to the sovereign wealth fund
right,
issue,
right,
are they investing in the sovereign wealth fund in things that are going to keep up with monetary debasement?
right.
If not, then we're losing ground.
Right. Okay. So the sovereign wealth fund to me makes total sense. I know there's a bunch of countries that are doing it, and it's just making them all kinds of money. Their Social Security is covered. Yeah, they don't have to worry about it because they've been doing the sovereign wealth fund. So now the couple of things that have come up more recently is as we've looked at Sachs doing his job, David Sachs doing his job, um, are the and as we get into this next stage, because of the passage of that first act, I can't remember the name of it, is we now have a stable coin, which must be backed up by bonds or other clear-cut assets, but mostly it's bonds. That's what people are doing is bonds. As a result of that, Tom Lee, I don't know your feelings about Tom Lee. I'm a big fan. Larry's a big fan. I think everybody's a big fan. But anyway, he's been right more than wrong, probably for the last 10 years, maybe than anybody. Tom Lee is switching, or I don't know if he's switching. I don't know what he's carrying in Bitcoin in his different activities right now, but definitely he's moving towards Ethereum because Ethereum is involved in this whole stablecoin aspect. And so he has a new fund, I guess, that's based on Ethereum, et cetera. Since you are the smartest person I know in this category that I know personally and that I have on my show, you may be the dumbest person in the country. No, no, you're the only person that I know that I can even ask these questions. How have you been looking at that issue, Ethereum versus Bitcoin, given that Ethereum is now this stable coin blockchain?
Yeah, I think we need to be very careful here, and I think this is a very important topic, and one that if we get this wrong, we're going to make a colossal mistake. So, Bitcoin is the only decentralized crypto asset that is backed by, incredible amount of energy, right? You can physically constrain it by the amount of energy it consumes.
Right.
The creators of Ethereum sort of said, well, that's a problem. Let's create one that's more energy efficient.
Hmm.
The problem with that is it's like saying, Randy, I want to build a bank to house a bunch of gold, but building thick walls is expensive. Let's build them out of paper instead,
I see. Okay.
right? We want, the gold will be in there. It'll be behind a wall. People can't see it. It'll be safe. Don't worry about it. It's a paper wall. So on the surface of it, it's like, yeah, okay, we've protected the gold, we
Mhm.
saved some money, but you know what? We're actually exposing ourselves to a massive risk because Ethereum is not decentralized.
Mhm.
Ethereum is controlled by a group of people, by a foundation. There have been examples in Ethereum's history where they've gone back and overridden what's on the ledger.
Mhm.
So depending on which side you were on at the time, you may say, well, that was a good thing because those transactions weren't valid. Those people were bad people. Take them off, right? It's the Russians.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Get rid of them. We don't care about them.
Yeah.
The problem is one
Well,
day
it's
that could be you, right? One day it could be you that they're
overriding. Yes.
transactions for. So that's the great thing about Bitcoin is once it's on the ledger, it's secure, it cannot be changed. It's backed by a wall of energy, right? No one can control Bitcoin is what I'm trying to say. It's
Yeah.
it's it's decentralized.
Right.
So we run, I think, a huge risk if we're going to design a new system, stablecoin system, a more efficient form of money, so to speak, that's going to be sitting on top of Ethereum. That would be a colossal mistake, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And I don't think that will work very long, or many people will look at that and say that doesn't make any sense.
So what would be how would the transition work if they decide that they think that Ethereum isn't the way to go and that Bitcoin is? Is there a way that we would be able to transition this system into Bitcoin instead or some
We would
third?
have to, we would have to, we would have to do that because if you didn't, you would have something that no one wanted to use.
I see.
It wouldn't be secure. It would be terrible. Now, that said, as it relates to Tom Lee, he is a very smart guy. And he's been a big advocate for Bitcoin for a
Mhm.
long, long time.
Mhm.
And he's the reason that a lot of people have acquired Bitcoin over the years and done very well. Ethereum, I think, is not useless. It's not useful as money, but it's useful as a technology for smart contracts, let's say, right? So if you want to have a contract that is self-executing that can, kick off a payment on Sunday night when no one's around, you could use Ethereum for that, right? And as a company, some of the security aspects of that maybe are kind of secondary. You want to focus maybe more on efficiency. Like Ethereum is, safe enough for this kind of thing that we're doing,
Right, right. Mhm.
right? And so in that case, I think Ethereum has a bright future in terms of some applications that you can use blockchain for and make it more efficient and less costly and all that. That's great. I'm all for that,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Like for example, when you think about buying a house and how long it takes to close,
Mhm.
why can't we come up with a more efficient system where it takes us 2 days instead
Right,
of a
right.
month,
Yes, yes.
right? All that information should be on the blockchain, all that stuff. We should have much more efficient friction, less friction in the system. Closing on a house is very expensive in many places,
Right, right.
right? And not just the time, but just also the monetary cost because everybody that's involved, all the lawyers and everything. So that's one application I think where potentially Ethereum or some other crypto asset could be very useful. You've got other crypto assets like Solana that are engineered for massive transaction volume.
Mm,
And if you and I are going to be making, micropayments for everything, or for example, if we want to secure our email and if we want to charge everybody a little bit of money to send an email to
right.
us,
Hmm.
that'll get rid of spam overnight.
I see. Yep, yep.
But we need a system that can handle micropayments in order for that to function.
And that's what that's.
Today's Visa and MasterCard networks, as amazing as they are, would not function with the number of micropayments that would be required for every single email that goes across the internet,
Right, right.
right? And then get into a world of AI agents doing things on behalf of us and humanoid bots maybe needing to transact with each other.
Hmm. Hmm.
We need new rails for this stuff.
All right.
Okay?
As long as we're going down the list, what about Dogecoin? Does it have any value or is it just a meme?
In my opinion, it doesn't. I haven't really studied it. I
Okay.
think a lot of these crypto projects were ways of people to, try to make some money and see if their thing took off. I think there's some interesting ideas in a number of them, but we don't need, 100 or 1,000 crypto assets. We're going to coalesce around the ones that truly add value, either, massive transaction volume, great for self-executing contracts, and then great as money and store value. Super secure.
So, what do you think in terms of how the dollar plays out in all of this? So some people I know think that cryptos could eliminate the dollar. We wouldn't need a an American currency or any kind of fiat currency anymore. These would replace it. And yet I see other people, again, I'll just use Tom Lee as the example, saying, oh no, the dollar, if anything, will become more important in the future. And these other currencies are other kinds of crypto, I guess currencies. They'll have their own spot, almost like you just said about each of the ones that are out there. The dollar has a reason, Bitcoin has a reason, Ethereum has a reason, Solana has a reason, etc.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things to talk about here. The world has many different fiat currencies. Some of them are absolutely terrible and they've failed, right? Look at the Venezuelan
Sure,
bolivar.
sure.
Look at Argentinian peso, although in recent years getting
Prior to, yes.
right. Zimbabwe, there's Lebanon, there's all these situations. Turkey, where the currencies just failed.
Right.
And so in that case, you could say, well, those currencies shouldn't exist. The natural thing would be to say, well, they should all just go to the US dollar.
Mhm.
Okay. The problem with that is then you're sort of outsourcing what the Federal Reserve does in terms of, you know, it, if the Fed's going to cut rates for the United States, maybe that's a bad time in Venezuela to cut
Right,
rates,
right,
right?
right.
'Cause we already have an inflation problem. We don't want to be driving that up. So you have to be careful about that. So if every government's going to want to have its own currency. They want to be in control of their own destiny. But the reality is these essentially are all failed experiments, and perhaps even including the US dollar at some point. So I think long term, I think it's highly likely that we go to a decentralized digital asset that becomes currency. For now, we're not there, and we won't be there for a long, long time. I sort of see Bitcoin running in parallel with the US dollar and the other fiat currencies. But we're going to continue to have fiat currencies fail.
Mhm.
That will drive more people into the assets that they think are the safest. And if you put the US dollar up against Bitcoin, more and more people, I think, are going to choose Bitcoin, right? Because it's secure, the government can't mess with it, it's
Right.
decentralized, all those things we've talked about in previous shows. And so over time, it's going to be hard for the US dollar to sort of compete against the superior form of money. I don't know how long it'll take for that to play out. It might be decades. So in the meantime, I think we see the US dollar as the medium of exchange, and we start to see Bitcoin increasingly become the store of value.
Okay,
Right?
so in that case, the Bitcoin you might think would be more competing with gold and to a lesser extent silver,
Definitely.
as opposed to
And real
as
estate and
opposed
bonds and stocks.
and real estate bonds and stocks as opposed to the dollar. So it's competing with other assets that are storehouses of value. So how does that, so the immediate thing you would think, the most logical thing you would think is to the extent that people see Bitcoin as a better storehouse of value and they move money into that storehouse of value, they would either be reducing the amount of money they're putting into these other storehouses of value, or they would be removing money from the other storehouses of value in favor of Bitcoin. So how does that play out? I think the most obvious is gold. I'm hard pressed to imagine that it impacts housing in the short term, but let's talk about it in terms of gold, maybe make it an easier conversation.
So let me share with you some numbers that Michael Saylor and has come up with. There's a website called Bitcoin 24
Mhm.
where they've come up with some projections for how Bitcoin is potentially could perform over the next 20 years.
Okay.
So I don't have these charts handy here.
Okay.
Actually, maybe I do. If you just hang on one second, Randy, I can bring this up and we can actually talk to these slides. I think these are really, really quite instructive.
Sure.
Just give me one second to locate them. As you can imagine, being, a chart and presentation guy, I have all these things at my fingertips on my computer.
Yeah, but my partner used to say, filing is easy, unfiling is the problem. Yeah.
Hmm.
Anybody can file. My story, that was his story. My story was if I file it, forget it. I'll never, ever, ever look at it again.
Here we go.
Okay.
Okay. This is kind of where we're at now, roughly.
Right.
The world has about one quadrillion in assets, 1,000 trillion in assets.
Mhm.
Here's how it kind of breaks down. Real estate's the biggest piece at about $380 trillion
Mhm.
over here. Bonds about 320 trillion. So those are the two biggest markets in the world. And this is not surprising because a lot of real estate is funded by debt, by
Yeah.
mortgages,
Right.
right? So this supports the real estate.
Mhm.
And then you've got money like bank deposits, things like that, 130 trillion. You've got equities, another 135 trillion. I think this is surprising to a lot of people. The equity market is small relative to the other three.
Right.
And then we've got people keep money in other things to store their value, like art, cars, and collectibles. There's another 27 trillion there, right? Paintings and so on.
Mhm.
Gold is 22 trillion, pretty big.
Mhm.
And then we've got Bitcoin at just 2 trillion. So Bitcoin right now is 0.2% of global assets,
And about
20 basis
10% of gold.
about 10% of gold. So here are some projections then for where we could be in 2045. Again, these are not my numbers. These come
Right.
from Bitcoin 24. Okay. And so they're projecting that the global asset value in 20 years could be 4 quadrillion or 4,000 trillion. So a 4x increase in the global asset value.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you notice, every single one of these asset categories has increased in size from where we were on the previous page.
Yeah.
So cash goes from 130 trillion to 500 trillion. Bonds go from 318 trillion to 840 trillion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real estate goes from 380 to 1.36 quadrillion.
Got it. Yeah.
Right? Equities inflate from 135 trillion to 850 trillion.
Hmm.
Gold also increases from 22 to 45. But Bitcoin is growing the fastest. It goes from 2 to 280.
Hmm.
So, Bitcoin can do well and everything else can continue to grow too.
Can do just fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's,
Now, run this out another 20 years. Does it
uh-huh.
look different? Does some of these things start to shrink? Maybe.
But maybe they shrink for other reasons. I mean, I can make an argument that that the United States is not going to be immune to housing values going down if population shrinks.
Yeah.
Now, if we continue to if we continue to bring in enough immigrants to keep the population growing, then no. But if at some point we actually, and there's a very good possibility that 2025 we will see negative population growth for the first time, I think, since the 60s or something. And so, and in the 60s, you think, wow, there must have been, what happened in the 60s that caused the negative population growth? I didn't look that up. But anyway, we could have a slight decrease in population in 2025 because of the net out migration. And by the way, I got criticized for using out migration the other day, but I've seen many people use it since. So apparently they watched the show.
Yeah. No, I think that's fine. There's different ways of describing things. I guess some people are sensitive to certain words, but Randy, as I think about this, in our previous show, we talked about this idea of capitalizing labor
Yeah,
and capitalizing intelligence,
right,
right? That's going to inflate the stock market value. Basically, we're taking assets that are not represented anywhere on this chart,
right,
and we're capitalizing them and we're creating stock market value. So that's going
right.
to inflate that blue box.
Yeah.
So if anything, I would actually say that in 2045, that blue box could be a lot bigger than what it's showing
Uh-huh.
here,
Uh-huh.
right? It's possible, for example, it's possible, I don't know how likely, but possible that Tesla itself is 110 trillion of that 800 trillion,
Sure.
okay? That wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for me if it
100%.
from the
Yep.
numbers, okay? And maybe by 2045, even beyond that. My numbers stop at 2035. This is a 20-year outlook here.
Yeah.
Right. I think that real estate, I think, could struggle. Real estate is useful. So if you look at assets, right, people hold assets for their utility. We
Mm.
all have to live somewhere. We all have to sleep somewhere.
Right.
So there's utility to real estate. Real estate's worth something for its utility value.
Hmm.
Real estate has also been monetized for its store value,
Right.
and a lot of real estate is reflective of that. And
Mhm.
so I think the right side of this chart becomes less important, perhaps, real
Perhaps.
estate, right? And so that's kind of interesting way to think about it. You say, okay, what's the real utility of real estate? Well, it may be a lot less than this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, you could also argue that there are certain real estate that is unique. They're true trophy properties.
Right.
You're not going to get another property that's, Eiffel Tower in Paris or whatever it is, um, or certain coastal areas where you just can't duplicate that.
Yeah.
Those things could do really well because as a store of value, they are unique and it's extra special in that sense.
Yeah. And you just made me think of something because the other thing that could happen I got to go back and change my chapter now because the potential for real estate to go up even more because wealthy people tend to have more than one piece of property.
Yeah.
And as we get more and more wealth, then individuals are going to be able to afford a vacation home, or two vacation homes, or just two homes because they want to have two homes. It's not even a vacation, one in the south and one in the north, depending on the weather. So there's a chance anyway that would be a fairly dramatic increase in demand.
Yes. Now, it could be offset by the fact that with cheap labor, cheap
Right,
energy,
right,
you can build houses at 10% of the cost we build them today.
right,
So if that's the case, if the cost of a new house is 1/10 of the
right.
existing,
Yes,
that puts a lid on prices for real estate that's used for utility, like people need to sleep somewhere,
right.
right? But so I think we actually end up with this bifurcation of the real estate market
Hmm.
more so than perhaps we do today.
Hmm.
Although that certainly exists today. There are certainly some properties today that are worth, hundreds
Right,
of millions of
right.
dollars.
Yep.
Um, so it's interesting to think this through. I mean, even on this chart here, art, is today 27 trillion in collectibles, and they're showing 110 trillion.
Right.
So a tripling of the value over 20 years.
So,
Uh,
so I do make the argument in the book that human art may go up in value, even as AI art is able to duplicate it almost exactly.
yeah,
But we've always had copycats that could duplicate art almost exactly, and it was a whole business of being able to confirm that it was human. So I think we may have to use blockchain to prove that something is actually the original artist. But I think there will be a great deal of value put on bespoke everything, and one of those will be art.
yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because if you can duplicate the anything that people want cheaply, then in theory the value of that original maybe is less. Although I guess you could also argue that the value of that original is even more because that's the unique one. Everything else is worthless.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You run the risk, I think, though, as you get more and more and more something that tastes change, that people get sick of it,
Right.
right? Like, does everybody want Mona Lisa in their house? No, right? Um,
Yes. Yes.
that one painting is worth an incredible amount of money.
Yeah, it's the only one, I think it's the only one at the Louvre that is roped off.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, it's going to be an interesting transition. My view is that the equity box here may be too low if I was
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
pass
Hmm.
judgment on these numbers.
Hmm.
I think we may be underestimating the value of capitalizing things that are currently not capitalized.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the whole other business that you've talked about before in terms of the use of Bitcoin or other blockchain capabilities for securitizing things,
Mm.
contracts or art or and on and on and on, equities. Um, so I know that this is already happening oh, I know, never mind. I'm gonna scrap that. We're not gonna talk about that today. We'll talk about this on another day because I have one more subject and I want to get to this. So again, sorry, Tom Lee, he did a video this morning, which was just phenomenal. I might even do an entire show on it. But one of the other things that he brought up was the idea that Goldman Sachs and the other one, Morgan
Morgan
Stanley,
Stanley?
are both poised. He thinks both of them are poised to go absolutely nuts in value. In fact, he thinks the finance part of the equities is poised to be one of the fastest growing areas. But his reasons had to do with AI and blockchain and Bitcoin, that
Hmm.
he believes that they will both take it. They will be the fastest. He thinks Bank of America will do just fine, but that those two are the most nimble and will be the fastest to take full advantage of these changes that are taking place right now in terms of the use of the usable aspects of Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as the AI to reduce employee overhead, to speed up processes, to move money like mortgages, to get that mortgage done in 2 days. These are things that he thinks they will be faster and better at, which will give them a massive advantage in terms of the other banks.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I haven't seen him talk about that, so I can't speak specifically to what he said there, but in concept, I don't disagree with it. Um, if you think about the investment banks, they are absolute mercenaries. They're going to go to where the opportunities are. That's how they're designed. That's how people there are compensated,
Right.
right? So you get the behavior that you pay for.
Right.
That's
Right.
the behavior you're gonna get. Right. So think about, here's an example. Think about what used to be called MicroStrategy. It's now formally called Strategy.
Right.
They've actually changed their name. Um, and what they have done is they have started to issue preferred securities. And these preferred securities, one of them in particular, the most recent one, uh, that's nicknamed Stretch, STRC is the symbol. It's designed to be an alternative to money market funds, CDs, bank deposits, short-term cash.
Yeah.
The rate that they're paying is 9%, right? A lot of people I talk to say that's too good to be true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
this company, Strategy, owns $75 billion of Bitcoin. That's collateral for these preferred stocks. These preferred stocks, because they're stock, they're equity, they're not debt, they never need to be paid back. Okay. Who who is selling these securities? It's the Morgan Stanleys of the world.
Hmm.
They're heavily incentivized to find customers for these securities.
Right.
And in the last one, they involve Fidelity Retail, and they got a lot of retail interest in the
Mm.
security,
Yeah.
right? So here's a company that's investing all its money in Bitcoin, and they're issuing securities now that are paying 9% that's going after their traditional fiat world that's
Yeah.
paying, maybe if you're lucky, 4 and change percent
Right.
short-term investments.
Yeah.
So double the return,
Yeah.
prospective return.
Yeah.
The fact that strategy has employed Wall Street to sell this is infinitely smart because, again, Wall Street, they're mercenaries. They're going to find a way to sell it because
Right.
they get compensated every
Yes.
time
Yeah. Right.
somebody buys this preferred stock. Every time they do a deal, it's basically an IPO, right?
Right.
They're going to
Right.
get paid.
Right.
IPOs are very profitable for Wall Street. So right there, we've got, the machine working behind the scenes to shift money from the fiat world over to Bitcoin. Because every time one of these preferred securities is sold and capital comes in the door for strategy, they go out and buy Bitcoin with it.
Right.
They keep a little back to pay the dividends.
Mhm.
They can just rinse and repeat all day long. So they've invented a perpetual money-making machine for Wall Street, right? And those Wall Street firms are going to do as much as that as they can because they are incentivized to do that. So that's just one example for you in terms of how adaptable those guys are.
Yeah. And I understand. I don't know if the number is right. I forget who said it the other day. The Goldman, I think it's Goldman, has 120,000 computer scientists on payroll.
Interesting.
120. And we ought to look that up. I wonder if that's true.
I
I
don't
mean, it was
know.
somebody that I respected. So it was, I'm not repeating it, from, my third cousin or something that happened to mention in a conversation. It was, on air type thing. Even if it's 12,000, it would be remarkable if it's 12,000. But having that many computer scientists who are working to find ways to manage all of this money, all the ins and outs, all the accounts. Somebody also said that one of the first places they expect AI to just really, I think it was Tom Lee, to really impact the Morgan Stanleys and the Bank of Americas of the world is in credit analysis.
Yeah.
And that it's just going to be so much more accurate to be able to take the credit information and make judgments about how much credit to give, when it's time to make the phone call and say, hey, you got to pay us back, et cetera. That this alone could be a massive, massive increase in efficiency for the banks.
Yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities there for sure. They will be big players in this. If we're going to be creating so much wealth in the stock market, because again, we're capitalizing labor, we're
Right.
capitalizing intelligence, then that spells opportunity for Wall Street,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Not just Nvidia, not just Tesla, but any other company that's doing that same thing. right?
Right.
There's IPO opportunities for all these things, right? By the way, Star SpaceX's Starship, we're basically going to be capitalizing space.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And the
what
way I
that's
the way I
what
like to
you and
think
I are
about
going to
it,
do a video on that.
yeah, right. Well, I'm going to do a post on this,
Yeah.
and we can do a video.
Yeah.
You can even read the post if,
I'll read the post. I'll
yeah,
make a video.
right. But the way I think about it, Randy, is that space is like a whole new continent that we have a chance to discover.
Yeah.
And so think about coming from Europe to North America and how that created such an opportunity for the world, right? And the growth that we've had. Now we have an even bigger quote unquote continent in space. That and again, most people are not talking about this, but with the successful launch of Starship yesterday in the test,
Yes.
we're getting closer and closer to that point where we can now send the ships to this new continent,
Yeah.
right? And all the applications and all the things that we can do in space. We'll put manufacturing in space. We'll put pharmaceutical production in space. We'll put data centers in space.
Wait. We're supposed to tease it. We're not supposed to do the show. Just tease the show. That's enough.
Oh, it's still a tease. I have a lot more ideas, depth behind that. But yes, yeah.
Yeah, you'll definitely going to see a show this weekend with Cern and I on this subject because, again, I think Cern, Brian Wang, and I are the only ones talking about it, and we all three, like at the same time, are like, "Oh my gosh, we've known it." Again, I think if you go back to the Elon Musk mission, you're going to see us talking about the potential for what SpaceX was going to do in terms of monetizing space. But I think it was when there was two things that Elon did. So this is my tease. There was two things he did. Number one is he took a picture, I think, of himself or somebody standing next to this laser device, which he says, can be sent over hundreds, thousands of miles with exact precision, especially through space. And I had read, I don't know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, how that will allow us to transmit transmit information from LA to New York in a millisecond.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, way faster than we
Yeah.
could do it now, which is a strategic advantage to any bank that's used or any Wall Street firm that's using that in order to do transactions. We saw the whole thing with New Jersey and New York, where they had a faster cable under the Hudson River, and they were making buku money just because they could do the transaction slightly faster than anybody else could. So, I mean, that was just one little tiny thing. But the other thing that Elon said was, or no, I think it was Brian reminded us yesterday in a video I did with Brian, is that we will now be down to $4 a kilogram to get it into space, which is less than it costs you to send a package from LA to New York by ground.
It's nuts. Right? Yeah.
So when you think about what that means in space, but also on Earth, by the way, these are some of the things we'll talk about in that video coming up this weekend. Cern, I think we should, you got one, I can tell you got something you got to get out there.
I was just going to say that if I order Amazon from the moon, it might get there faster than if I wait, and receive it here on Earth. We'll see how that transpires.
Let's see how all that works out. All right. What I want you guys in the comments, what I want you to let me know is, I told you weeks ago that this channel is going to start going more into AI because that's where Tesla's going. It is now an AI company. So if I'm not telling you enough stuff about cars and not telling you enough stuff about energy and not telling you enough stuff about bending metal, I'm sorry, because we got to follow where the company is going, and the company's an AI company. Number two, I mentioned a few days ago that I'm going to start in my morning and afternoon. I'm just not going to just quote where Bitcoin is, but also where Ethereum is. And there's a reason for that. Okay. We're also moving into this world. Whether I'm ready to invest in any kind of a coin or not is irrelevant to where the show needs to go. The show needs to make sure that it's keeping you informed on the things that are impacting Tesla, impacting the economy, impacting the stock market, impacting Tesla stock, and that includes these cryptocurrencies. So CERN, thank you for helping us get into that realm, which is obviously going to be important going forward.
Yes, Randy. And before you cut me off at the end of the show, thank you, Randy.
Yeah, I had a trigger figure on Thursday night. You might have noticed. It's been great talking to you.